All right, hello everybody. Welcome to our next lesson here in our unit Renaissance, Reformation, and Revolution. So today we're going to be looking at Renaissance art in particular. So our objectives and standards to identify Renaissance artists and explain how new ideas affected the arts of the period, and our standards to contrast the importance of historical documents, artifacts, and sites which are critical to world history. And our desired result, what characteristics made up the art of the Renaissance? So think about some of the things about Renaissance art. How did it change from previous art styles? What were some of the things that artists or other people included in their artwork or design? That's what we're kind of talking about today. Excuse me. So changes in art. Paintings, sculpture, and architecture experienced change during the Renaissance. Remember that there were many wealthy merchants and wealthy princes and also popes who all supported the arts during the Renaissance. Now, art of the Renaissance reflected humanist views. Remember, humanist views moving away from religion a little bit, moving more towards, the achievement of humans, the achievement of individuals, focusing on some different techniques that we're going to talk about here in the next couple of slides. Now, it did focus on religious figures. Like I said, it doesn't move completely away from religion, but it does focus on religious figures and elements, but it also combined religious figures and elements with those of ancient Greek and Roman themes as well. So, Renaissance techniques and styles. The art of ancient Greece and Rome was realistic. It made you feel part of the painting, or it made you feel like the sculpture was basically a person frozen in time. It looked real, it felt real, and that was unlike the art of the Middle Ages, which was more kind of quote-unquote flat, very two-dimensional, not a lot of color. Art of the Middle Ages wasn't very realistic. So painters of the Renaissance are also going to develop new techniques for representing art in realistic ways. And one of the ways that they do this is a technique known as perspective. And I want to take a minute here to show you this. So perspective is basically centering on the middle of the image, as you can see here with the blue lines in the painting. And it makes you feel like the picture is pretty much like 3D, quote unquote, right? It looks like you can kind of walk into the picture, you can walk into the painting, and things like that. So art is going to begin to be showing these new styles in three-dimensional ways. We also have other techniques used in Renaissance art known as shading, and kind of seeing the background where the mountains are and the gray clouds, making it look darker so it looks farther away, making people, in their clothing, like you can kind of see like maybe the folds of their clothing. Like look, you can see that would be considered shading because you can see it's kind of dark there. So it makes it look like the clothing is moving almost, right? Like when our clothing moves or whatever, we have shading in it, or shadows. So you can see that in the painting here as well. We also have rounding objects, makes it look more realistic and more dramatic as well. So advances in architecture. The Renaissance artists also rejected the Gothic styles of architecture of the Middle Ages. We're going to see, in terms of the Renaissance, more columns, arches, and domes that were used by the Greeks and Romans begin to appear, okay? In this picture here, this is known as the Duomo, or the Dome in Florence, Italy. And this was by Renaissance architect Filippo Brunelleschi. Trying my best with his name there. And he was famous for his designs and engineering, especially in architecture. So he is responsible for the Duomo in Florence, Italy. And we'll take a closer look at that in live class as well. So the life of Leonardo da Vinci. Some of you may know the name Leonardo da Vinci from different things or different learning that you may have learned about him. So he was a most prominent and famous figure of the Renaissance. He was an artist and a painter that showed freshness and realism in his works. One of the most famous paintings of his is the Mona Lisa. And the Mona Lisa is a portrait of a woman who has kind of a mysterious smile on her face, and it's one of his most famous pieces, like I mentioned earlier. Leonardo da Vinci also painted The Last Supper, which also shows many elements of Renaissance art. But he was not just an artist and a painter. Leonardo da Vinci was also an inventor. In fact, many of his drawings and sketches showed early designs of the parachute, for example, and the underwater submarine. And these are things that won't be invented till hundreds of years later, but Da Vinci had the idea in his head and drew sketches of it. He also studied anatomy, which is the study of the human body, botany, which is the study of plants. He studied music, engineering, optics, and architecture as well. So here's some of Da Vinci's famous paintings. Here you may recognize this if you see it. This is the Mona Lisa, so this is by Da Vinci. The picture down here is known as the Last Supper. It depicts Jesus Christ with his disciples at the Last Supper. If you know anything about religion and things like that. So again, perspective here, right? So here's Jesus Christ in the middle of the picture, and it almost looks kind of like, you know, the lines kind of focus on Jesus Christ, right? We can kind of see it looks almost three-dimensional. The disciples are looking at him. So again, perspective and also three-dimensional. Also some shading used as well. And then the top picture here is actually a sketch of Da Vinci's airplane, or a flying machine. Didn't call it an airplane necessarily, but it was a flying machine. So he believed that a person could ride in this thing and fly around the sky. So again, kind of an early form of an airplane. So other Renaissance artists. We have Michelangelo, who was a sculptor, an engineer, a poet, an architect, and a painter. Some of his famous works, the Pieta, David, and the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. He also designed the dome of St. Peter's Cathedral. He did not live to see that built, but he designed it. And also Raphael. Raphael blended Christian and classical styles, and some of his famous works are the School of Athens, and I'll show you some examples here. So here are some examples of Michelangelo's. This is the Pieta. This is the Virgin Mary, or Mother Mary, holding the body of Jesus Christ as it came off the cross. Again, if you know religion and things like that, or Christian religion and things like that. So this is one of his more famous sculptures. Again, seeing how realistic it looks with, you know, the shading and the design, the folding of the clothing, the body of Jesus Christ, kind of the muscular structure of that and things like that. Looks very realistic. We also have David, another famous sculpture of Michelangelo. And then the Sistine Chapel, which you can kind of see some of the paintings here on the ceiling, showed images from the book of Genesis from the Bible. So again, a lot of artwork by Michelangelo for you to look at there. And then we have Raphael. This is the painting known as the School of Athens. Talks about a lot of the Greek philosophers. I believe this is Aristotle in the center here. And he also tried to, you know, again, it looks Greek in nature, but it also has some kind of classical religious tones to it as well. But again, it almost looks like you can step into the painting, right? It almost looks 3D, like we could almost practically walk into the painting and talk with the people in the picture. So again, just another example of Renaissance art for you to recognize and look at as well. All right, so our closure. What characteristics made up the art of the Renaissance? Think about perspective. Think about a lot of the classical and religious elements people are focusing on. Think about a lot of the design that they're using in their sculpture or their architecture and things like that. And that will help you answer your question. All right, so be sure to include this in your weekly summary. Answer the questions to the best of your ability. If you have questions or concerns, please don't be afraid to reach out to me. And I hope to talk to you all soon.